Hi, welcome to Wonder in the Weeds show, where we are going to talk about all of the mess of life and how to still thrive and grow right alongside all of it. Today's episode was actually going to be about something completely unrelated, but I was struck by a case that's in front of the Supreme Court today. No, I know you're shocked. I'm repping you in my Minnesota sweatshirt, and that's not what today's episode is about. But I could talk about that for days and days and days. Anyway, there is a Supreme Court case. I don't know when you'll be listening to this, so it'll be days or weeks in the past, but and we'll know the outcome. I don't even know the outcome yet, but it is they're hearing two different plaintiffs. I don't know if they're called plaintiffs when it's the Supreme Court. I'm not a lawyer, but they are two cases of women, transgendered girls, actually, one woman and one girl, I think a middle schooler and a 19-year-old, who are fighting to be allowed to participate in sports. And I have a lot of opinions about that. But I didn't have time to get an expert, meaning either a transgender woman or a doctor who does gender affirming care on today. I didn't have time to get somebody on to speak with me, but I have a fair amount of personal experience, both from being a therapist for the last 10 years, and compassionate human being with friends whose kids have transitioned in the past, and a mother of a trans daughter. So I have some personal experience, and I'm just going to give you my personal experience because I will do an episode later with the actual scientific experts who can talk about this more. But the reason for doing it is I feel like a lot of what comes out of these court cases is based solely on misinformation and fear. And at least I'm giving people the benefit of the doubt. There's probably a whole bunch of hate tied up in there too. But I think there are a lot of people out there who try to make these well-meaning arguments about like seeing both sides. And as far as I'm concerned, there aren't two sides to this argument. There is a right side and a wrong side, but there are not two equal sides to this. So, but since I do not have the expertise of a gender affirming care doctor or just researcher, scientist, biologist, somebody who knows, I'm just going to give you my personal experience as both a therapist and a parent of somebody who's transitioned. And let me give you a little background on myself first. And a lot of people don't know this because as an adult, I'm mostly just like a weekend gym warrior and off and on at that. I've spent the bulk of my adulthood trying to find the physical fitness that I actually enjoy because I spent the first, how old are you when you go to college? 19, 18 years of my life playing team sports and getting my physical fitness and my personality and my work ethic and a whole bunch of other things came from being an athlete on teams throughout my life. I just happened to play sports that were team sports. I started at age 4 in a swimming pool. I got sort of chucked into a swimming pool because I wanted to hang out with my older sisters. And so they were like, great, join the swim team, and threw me in a pool. And swam from age 4 to age 18 when they don't let you swim anymore on the summer team unless you go to college and do it. I played basketball from, probably like second or third grade when you're allowed to play. I am one of the fortunate people who still was attending school at a time where we had school sports. So I was really lucky. In New Jersey, they still have those, but in the Washington area, they sort of went away, at least when my kids were little. I don't know about the rest of the country, but we had a full sports program growing up in my K-8 elementary grammar school. And so I played basketball and I cheered for the football team in the fall, and in the spring, I played softball. And then when I went to high school, I continued to play. I didn't cheer anymore. That was not my jam. I was, quite frankly, I wasn't feminine enough for cheerleading in high school. And there were no boys on the cheerleading squad when I was in high school. So I didn't cheer anymore. I, in the fall, decided to learn how to play field hockey. And so I played field hockey in high school in the fall. I played basketball for 1 year in the winter. And then realized that I think maybe I had capped out in the 8th grade. I went from being, one of the tallest to one of the shortest, and definitely not the best athlete on the court. So I played basketball for 1 year. And then after that humbling experience, I'm sure I did anything the next year in the winter. And then I swam 1 year in the winter for school and hated every possible second of that. So I kind of was off and on in the winter. What I would start doing in the winter in high school was getting ready and prepping for softball. So I grew up back in the day where you played multiple sports. You weren't playing one thing all year round. Swimmers were, like the good swimmers that were going to go to college or maybe had like Olympic dreams. They were swimming all year round. But every other sport, it was like AAU basketball. It's probably why I didn't make the basketball team in high school, because AAU basketball went throughout the year. But like field hockey, we played through the season and then did some like conditioning and stuff, but we didn't even meet as a team except for the fall season. And same with softball. We did some conditioning. I went to a bunch of like off-season clinics and things because I was a pitcher and I didn't want my older sister wanted me to get better and be good. She was a sports writer. She was a journalist and covered women's sports in our area. So she was sort of plugged into like local coaches and local like clinics and things like that. So she sort of drugged me around in high school to these different places. And anyway, the whole point is to tell you is sports was a huge part of my life from age 4 to age, 19 or 20 when I went to college and like struggled to find sports, like tried to, I wasn't good enough to play. I went to a Division I school and I was no way good enough at any of those sports to play Division I. We didn't even have a softball team at my college at the time. I couldn't have played if we did. And our club teams were sort of sporadic. So like, I didn't really play any club teams either. I would do all the like athletic stuff that my sorority did. And then just kind of like, that was around the time where working out, I'm putting that in quotes for those of you who are just listening, working out was sort of becoming a thing. I know that sounds funny, but like there was a time back in the 1900s where working out wasn't like part of everybody's everyday existence. So my roommate in college was a dancer. So like that's how she stayed in shape. And I had some women in the sorority house with me that would like go to the gym and would run just for fun because they enjoyed it. And I remember thinking like, I only did that stuff because I had to in practice. I never wanted to lift weights or go to the gym or run for fun. So it was like my early adulthood was like a weird time of trying to find out who I was as an athlete. But I definitely would have described myself growing up as an athlete. And so I have a fair amount of opinions about women's sports. And from the beginning of people arguing that trans women shouldn't be part of women's sports, it just never sat right with me. I've played on a bunch of teams. I've played it against a bunch of teams. I've faced, opponents who are taller than me, stronger than me, in better shape than me, more skillful than me, and all of those things, but less skillful, shorter, less, slower than me, all of the things. Like my teammates and the women that I played against, we came in all different shapes and sizes. And, I think of swimmers specifically, and like the ones that were good were shaped in a way that made them like extra, they were taller and longer. I mean, think about basketball. Like part of the reason I didn't make the basketball team after freshman year, I didn't even try out because I wouldn't have made it, was because they were all like a foot taller than me. And the ones that weren't taller than me were way faster than I was. So like their bodies just didn't look like mine. And I, in some ways was like, I don't think they ever will. I wasn't a cheerleader because my body didn't look like that. The point is, I played sports for a very long time. When this idea came up that trans women shouldn't be able to be in sports because it was quote unquote unfair, at first it just baffled me. Like, what do you mean unfair? We're not like, not every female athlete looks the same, has the same abilities, has the same skill. Like we're not all, cut from the same cloth. And often that makes a difference on the court or the field or the pitch or the pool. And so this idea that that there was some unfairness to trans women playing was just confusing to me at the beginning. And then I started talking to people and hearing people some people that I respected, other people that I was not surprised that it was just hateful. But like the ones that I cared about, the ones that I respected otherwise, that would say things like, well, we have to consider safety and we have to consider the fairness. Like sometimes parents are scared. As much as I wanted to just dismiss that, and I still really sometimes want to just dismiss that as an opinion, because what are you scared of? Like, why aren't you scared of the like girl that's double the size of your girl when they're on the court together? Why are you only scared because you think that person was born a biological male? I was frustrated and I was angry and I was also a little confused. Like, what do you think happens out on a court or in a pool or on a pitch? There are people of varying talent levels, of different shapes and sizes, of all of it. So then I just had to, because in my own head, in my own heart, I always have to justify for these people that they're not bad people, that they must just be ill-informed, or they must just be, I don't know, missing the point or something, or getting bad information. And so I just want to go through very basically, and I'll put some books in the if you have any interest, I'll put some books in the show notes too, that you can do some more reading on this, because I think part of the problem is a lot of people don't know what gender affirming care and the transgender journey is. So I'm just going to speak from what I know. Again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, and I'm not a transgender woman. Although there's a lot of people on the internet who think I am, which I think is hilarious because anyway, I think that's really funny. But yeah, there's plenty of trolls out there who think that I am. Maybe it's the voice. I don't know. Anyway, here's what I know. When a child, and I'm going to talk about kids because what people seem to be most afraid of, one of the Supreme Court cases, I believe the young lady's in middle school. And then I think the other woman was in middle school or even elementary school when she transitioned to begin with. Like, it's a track and field person, and she ran on the track and field team. I believe I read that she was maybe in like the 4th or 5th grade when she was on the girls track and field team and wasn't a very good runner. So her coach pointed her toward the field events of track and field. One of them, I'm not sure, discus or something like that. My point is they were children when all of this started. They're now, middle school and high school, or middle school and college, and they're fighting against that, but they have both transitioned as kids. And so my experience is when you transition as a kid, pre-puberty, that's what I mean by kid. If you have not gone through puberty either way, you are given, well, first you go through a whole bunch of counseling. So I see a lot of people online screaming and yelling about, like, we're doing this to these kids. We're making these kids, we're giving them surgery, and we're giving them this, and we're whatever, mutilating them, whatever else they talk about. Again, I'm not 100% positive, but I'm 99% positive no one has any kind of surgery prior to 18. But if your child comes to you pre-puberty and there's gender affirming care applied, it starts with counseling, with, talking it through, talking about gender, about body dysmorphia, talking about your feelings about gender, talking about, talking with parents, talking with your counselor, talking with parents and your counselor. It's a lot of time spent on the mental health aspect of it in a caring, encouraging, and accepting way. So not trying to talk them out of it, not trying to guide them in one way or the other, not trying to, what are the words people use? Not trying to, turn them into something or not turn them into something. It's more of just an open, exploration of what are you feeling? Why are you feeling it? What might be an outcome that you desire? So counseling, lots and lots of counseling. And then if you choose the next step, pre-puberty, you would be on puberty blockers to sort of give you some time to make those decisions. So that's not even necessarily a final step. That's a beginning step of, depending on what age you are, if it's like you want to kind of give yourself some breathing room to make these decisions, you go on puberty blockers. Then if you continue on, you are given either a blocker for the hormones that you are eliminating or trying to get rid of, and then hormone additions to what you want to transition for. So since we're talking about women, you are given a testosterone blocker and then you are likely given estrogen to balance those out in a way that matches with your gender. And so the reason that I bring this up is because that biologically changes who the person is. When you drop those testosterone levels, and anybody who is in the middle of menopause can attest to this. When you drop the testosterone levels and increase the female hormone levels, your biology changes, your muscle mass changes, your voice changes, and especially if it's done pre-puberty. If you haven't gone through puberty as a boy, because we're talking about transgender women, if you haven't gone through puberty as a boy, then you don't go through puberty as a boy. You go through puberty as a girl. And so there are some differences, but as far as being on an athletic field, court, there aren't the kind of differences people are talking about that make them dangerous or unfair. So this idea that by excluding trans girls and women, we are somehow being fair is just completely backwards. Think what you want, I suppose. I mean, I don't really believe that you should be able to think what you want about this. I think there is a right and a wrong, but think what you want about the whole idea of transitioning. You can't make the argument that a trans woman or a trans girl who has transitioned, is a boy. You just can't make that argument. It's not true. They might have been born with boy parts, but they've been through transition and are therefore a girl. So this argument that it's unfair or that they pose a danger, it just isn't true. You could also get into the argument that it's completely exclusionary and wrong and against everything Title IX stands for, but that's a different argument for another day. I want to present information that I'm hoping maybe people don't have that are trying to make these unfair arguments. Going back to the beginning, when I was an athlete, I talked about how there were different body types and different skill levels and strength levels, and not to mention developmental levels. I mean, you had women that were, great at the shot put because they had a strong build, that they had broad shoulders and stocky hips and all of the things that make you bigger and stronger than at the time me, who had none of those things, but because I hadn't developed into them yet. I definitely now have broad shoulders and stocky hips, but when I was 15, 16, 12, 11, I didn't. I was like a little toothpick of a thing, and often actually called a boy back in those days. So to say that someone who has transitioned to being a woman or a girl is somehow going to be an unfair participant in a girl's sport or a girl's competition is just wrong. It's not only sort of ludicrous and exclusionary and mean, but it's actually wrong, biologically wrong. And so next time someone tries to say, I don't want this girl to play. Well, I don't want this young girl to play with my daughter because my daughter could get hurt. I would ask that person what's to stop her other teammates from hurting, or her other opponents from hurting her, or for her anybody she ever comes up against from hurting her. It just isn't true. The other argument that I would make here, and this is one that I have a hard time articulating because it actually just makes me so angry as a former athlete and as a woman who considers herself still somewhat athletic. The idea that that there are boys out there who are just wanting to do this so that they could get on the girls' team. The idea of that is so crazy. And I'm saying that as a mental health professional. It's so crazy that I can't even believe we're entertaining it. I can't even believe it's as crazy as thinking somebody's transitioning just so they can get into a bathroom and sexually assault someone. First of all, when have men ever felt like they needed to do anything other than just be a man in order to sexually assault a woman? But that's a story for another day. To assume that a young girl calculating enough to say, a young girl is calculating enough to say, I'm going to transition to, a young boy is calculating enough to say, I'm going to transition to a girl so that I can be the best on that soccer team, is just the craziest thing I've ever heard. And as a woman and a former female athlete, current female, in the world. It's so offensive to think that we are so meek and mild-mannered and unable to compete that we need someone on a Supreme Court bench to protect us, or a governor or a school board or whatever to protect us from boys. There are so many other areas that women need you to protect them from boys and men. This is not one of them. We are athletes who know how to take care of ourselves on the court, on the field, on the pitch, in the pool. We need protection from pedophiles, coaches who take advantage, and team trainers, and all the other men in the arena with women athletes. We need protection from that. We don't need protection from trans girls or women. They're not trying to hurt us. They're not unfairly participating with us. They are just trying to live their lives as they are and pursue the things that make them happy. And who are we to say that that's not okay? If you're going to get into the biology of it, first you need to get into the biology of it in general. Like, why should, a 6'3" female swimmer be able to compete in the same pool as a 5'2" female swimmer? Why? Isn't that unfair, according to you? When do we stop the policing if we start with transgendered women? Do we suddenly have a body type that's acceptable and that it's unfair if they don't have that body type? There are 2 Olympic swimmers who are physically different than every other person that was in the pool, a man and a woman. I'm not going to say names. I'm not going to get into that. But there is a man and a woman, recent Olympians, who are so physically different. Gosh. A man and a woman, both Olympians, both outstanding swimmers, who are so physically different from anybody else in the pool with them. Clearly, you could make an argument that it's unfair. We don't, but you could. So if we go down this road of exclusion, who's to say that the very next thing that hasn't happened is that we decide, oh, that person's too tall, or that person's too muscular, or that person's too strong, or that woman clearly has more testosterone than she should because she's big and bulky. Who's to say that's not okay? But that's a whole theoretical argument that you can get into. What I'm talking about is straight biology. If you are trying to argue with me that these trans women are boys and men, you're wrong. They aren't. They have been through transition. They have different body types. They have different hormone levels. They fit with the women that they want to compete with and against. So there isn't anything unfair. There isn't anything inherently dangerous. There isn't any of it. And I'm just kind of tired of the arguments. So look, that wasn't very wondery in the weeds, but what I will tell you about this topic specifically is the wonder of this whole journey as a parent of a transgender woman but there's so much wonder. But one is the availability of care for her has been just outstanding. And I feel so lucky that we lived in places that she could find. I feel so lucky that we have lived in places where she could find gender affirming care, and not only find it, but like be embraced by the communities that it's offered in, both in New Jersey and Minnesota. We've been really lucky. Her beautiful spirit, and has been a beautiful spirit since the day she was born, but it has blossomed in the years since she has been living as her true self. And I have gotten to witness that. And that to me is the wonder in it, to just watch her bloom into this incredible, happy, joyful, resilient human being has been a really wonderful gift that I feel lucky to have been able to witness. I'm scared every single day. But the wonder in that is this magnificent daughter that I have gained through all of this. And to know that she feels good about who she is and the life she's living is quite wonderful. So that's all I got for today. I hope that you will think about some of these things next time you hear an argument against some 5th grader who wants to play on the girls' soccer team, or some 11th grade girl who's been on the girls' teams and suddenly isn't allowed to play anymore. I hope you think about these things, both my experience as a female athlete with women of all different shapes and sizes, about the inclusivity of Title IX, and about the pure fiction that is biologically these women are somehow unfairly matched or dangerous to the other women on the courts or fields or pitches or pools. Keep looking for the wonder. I'll see you next week.